Deputy Commandant General of the Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps, Kelechi Madu, there. Back to you, Dr. Erinosho. You were trying to establish a nexus between the distance of some of these local governments and where the votes will be collected and the issue of how that will play a role vis-a-vis security.
Yes. And just to wrap that up, Ife-Dayo is 72 kilometers away. Isokon is 100 kilometers, and Ife East is 26 kilometers. You'll be surprised. Well, the average is 46 kilometers from Osogbo. And then you ask me why I've put Ife East. When you superimpose those numbers onto the average population of voters in those local governments, that gives you a totally different picture, you see. Suddenly, Ife-Dayo, which was 72 kilometers away, has about 248 persons per polling unit. Isoko has about 685 people.
Per polling unit?
On average. Okay. And Ife East has over 1,000 people per polling unit. That's quite interesting because that brings up potential unforeseen internal disruptions and potential disruptions between, the polling units on average to Osogbo. We can then move that on to reasons why it seems really, well, it would potentially be relatively calm in Osun in this this election. But we can have that conversation a bit later.
All right. It's interesting that you say that because Mr. Madu pointed out that let's pray. But that as at the time he was being spoken to, there were no incidents of violence at all. Is that possibly because of the relatively small size of Osun in terms of voter population or those who are actually participating? We don't have the numbers yet, but those who are actually participating in the election, or is it a determination that, as you pointed out earlier in this segment, that people seem determined to right the wrongs of the elections as we have seen them coming down the line?
I don't think it's because of the fact that we're having an election in the state, not even a general election. It's a one-off election again. There's no legislative house election. We're just talking about the governorship only election. I don't think that that's the reason. If you look at Osun State very well, it has a very terrible history of electoral volatility.
That was why I was.
But quite surprisingly, and that's pleasant, this time around, even in the run-up to the election, the usual violence that was witnessed in the run-up to the election, in previous election, we've not seen that in this election. Talking about Ife and the area, it used to be very volatile. There was a time in the past when a well-known Nollywood actor who was going into politics and going to the House of Representatives had almost 3 or 4 brothers wiped out in the course of an election in that area. So I think that there are some developments. The dynamics seems to have changed. And we can talk about all that. A lot of things have changed even, in Osun State. For example, and people don't even want to even remark this. Since 1999, Rauf Aregbesola will be the first governor that will complete 2 terms successfully in that state. And then be on seat when an election is being conducted, hoping to hand over to a fellow party man. Osun has never had it like that. We've always had, crisis and controversy, election petitions and all that. But we've not had that, with this election. And second, the INEC and the security agencies, from information available before this election, also appear to have honed their art in election management. We've talked about INEC just now, who was being given self-plaudit by the INEC official. But even for the security, we're now being told that, oh, before the election, policemen who will, provide security for this election, and as little but as significant as the issue of feeding, whose feeding hitherto have been neglected. So INEC officials will be feeding themselves, and then the policemen who are supposed to
protect them,
troublemakers at bay, just looking at them. That became an issue, even on the floor of the legislature when INEC was, meeting with the legislators for approval of funds for these elections. Yes. The issue of feeding came up. And so for me, that's an indication that they are giving serious attention to even the minutest details. So we may be reaping the dividend of that right now. I've said that, and I've cautioned that perhaps it's too early for us to say it's Eureka, everything is honking dory, and that everything is okay. But so far, we can see that unlike in the previous election, we've not had that kind of violence that usually attends election, in Nigeria, particularly in
that state.
To cap it, we've not witnessed any assassination of big political players, either as supporters and all that. Before Aregbesola became the governor, in that state, Olajokun, his friend, was murdered, on the roadside in that place. And so, if the people of Osun resolve as a people to turn the page, to say they don't want violence anymore in their state, that would be a good thing. Because election really is like a festival of democracy. It's not supposed to be
a bloodbath.
A bloodbath. So if they decide that that's the way to go, it will be a good thing, and everybody will applaud the people of the state for that.
Dr. Erinosho, let me play some kind of devil's advocate here. Let's say that the people of Osun State didn't decide, as Mr. Ogunye said, to turn the page. Could it be that the overwhelming presence of security personnel, because, going by the records we have, again, like 15,000 policemen, 6 commissioners of police, an assistant